Hey, please excuse my quarantine look. My name is Burrell again. Coming at you with a little morning motivation here on another week that we have here in the beautiful city of Atlanta, Georgia. Trees, mountains, pollen is gone, so that means we know that the seasons are changing, even though it is uh, somewhat hazardous to some of our health. But the beautiful thing about this season I was thinking about is Ezekiel 36. In Ezekiel 36, it's a very interesting passage of scripture because it is in Ezekiel 36 that we literally see the hand of God prophesied to the prophet, and the prophet then prophesies that what's going to go on in the nation. At that time, the Babylonians had taken captivity over the children of Israel, and in 36 we see a couple of things. In the beginning part of the chapter number 36, verses number 1 through about 8, 9, we see that God says he sees the hand of the enemy. This means that there's no deed going unnoticed against the people that God has called to be his people. It means that God sees exactly what the enemy is trying to do to harm me and knows exactly when to switch the script. It's in those couple of verses that God says he sees the hand of the enemy. And if you go down, verses number 26 to about 29, 30 are really where I get excited. He says, I'm going to give you the land of your ancestors. I'm going to give you the land of your ancestors. It's no coincidence that almost 400 years ago, our ancestors were oppressed and suppressed 31,000 times. 31,000 trips were made from the motherland, Africa, to Brazil, and from Brazil then to the United States of America. There's a huge misconception that people have that they think that that most slaves came from Africa just straight to America, where the truth is that majority of slaves came from the Portuguese, which came from Africa to Brazil. It was from Brazil then to America who got the second amount of slaves. That's why you saw some shipped off in the Caribbean. You saw some where we see Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and even some in Puerto Rico who look and act just like us, right? So here it is in this text. God says, I'm giving you this land back. However, the problem is, what do you mean you're giving me this land back in the sight of a famine? That's interesting because that is a good question. How would you give me land back that was taken from me? And the question that we ask is, how in the world do I get land back when I seemingly seem as though that everything around me is destroyed and destruction? Especially in a time like this where we see coronavirus ravaging our country, ravaging our world, ravaging our globe. We see domestic terrorism here in our country, in the United States, and see them do it abroad to other countries. And yet we say that this is the United States of America, God's country. This is, in fact, somewhat resembles the ideology that has created a culture of Jim Crow, that's created a culture where the civil rights had to stand up. It's created a culture that says, I have the right to oppress you, even though we know that oppression is an enemy. Watch this. So then how do we see this in the face? Well, the reason why we see this in the face, because the next verse literally says, this famine is not for you. It says it in the text. So how then do I deal with this? It's because this famine that we're experiencing is not for us, but it's for God to get the glory. Watch this. A lot of us in 2020 received prophecies in January that this was going to be our year. This was going to be the year of plenty. This was going to be the year that we grew. This was going to be the year that we gained things. This was going to be the year that God operated and showed out for us. This was going to be the year that we was going to get our 20 acres and a move. This was going to be our year to get our 2020 vision, right? That's what everybody said. And when you see the first couple of months, I hope I'm not the only one who can say the first couple of months made me feel like just throw all of 2020 away. But God told me something. He said, Burrell, look at that verse. Look at verse number 30. And in verse number 30, he literally says, not only am I going to give you the land of your ancestors, so the land that the oppressed thought was for them, I'm going to allow them to get it right and get it ready for your choosing. But then God also says in the text, I'm going to give you the land of your oppressors, but I'm going to let you prosper in a place that people thought you should have died in. This famine is not for you. There's no documented cases of corona in Jamaica. There's even less deaths documented in Africa, which means this famine, and all of us have been affected. I've had family, my son's grandfather, my great aunt have been affected by it. We've had people who passed from it. We've seen these things happen. However, God still has us here, and the reason he does is because what looked like the prophesying and the prophets were wrong about, they really, really were correct about. See, beautiful things don't come in the face of great seasons. It comes in the face of tragedy. Some of the top companies were founded during recessions. See, God told me you got to relook at how you look at this thing, Burrell, because the prophets weren't lying. The prophets weren't wrong. This famine is not for you to die in. This famine is for you to gain access and to gain growth in. This famine is going to help you multiply. This famine is going to create the creative side in you. This famine is going to cause you to look at this thing and this situation differently. This is when you start your business. This is if they tell you that you laid off, you take that $1,000 and go invest it and move in with somebody and invest that $1,000 and see it regroup. This is the time that you start your business, that you go ahead and say, you know what, they're giving out houses. This is the time that we go ahead and lament, go ahead and cry, deal with the pain that you're dealing with. I lost my pastor a couple of weeks ago, and it was devastating. Still, every day I almost cried thinking about him and my father. But I have to realize that this is the time now where, hey, go ahead and make a foundation in his name. Churches, this is the time now where we go ahead and educate our own. If they want to close down the schools and the schools are on for the year and these kids need somewhere and their parents have to work, let's open up these churches and create an avenue where they're getting educated from an Afrocentric view on who they are as African kings and queens. Let's not use this time as a crutch, but as a catalyst and a stepping stone to do what God has created us to do. This is still your season. This is still going to be great. I love you, man. Have a blessed day. I know this was a little bit long, but we home anyway. Y'all have a good day, man.